In 2006, a man named Jack Whitaker won $315 million. It was the largest single-ticket lottery jackpot in American history at that time. He was a contractor from West Virginia. He was already a millionaire before the ticket. He had a loving family, a successful business, and by most accounts, a good life. And then the lottery made him one of the wealthiest people in the state overnight. 4 years later, he was broke. His granddaughter was dead. His daughter was dead. His marriage had collapsed. He had been robbed, sued, and arrested multiple times. And he was on record saying that he wished he had torn that ticket up and thrown it in the trash the moment he found out he won. That is not an unusual story. That is the pattern. Study after study, case after case, the story repeats itself with different names and different details, but the same devastating ending. And once you understand why it happens, you will never think about money the same way again. Here's the number that should stop you cold. 70% of lottery winners lose all of their winnings within 7 years. Some researchers put that figure even higher. We're talking about people who receive millions of dollars, sometimes tens of millions of dollars, and within less than a decade, they have nothing left. Not a smaller version of their fortune. Nothing. How is that possible? How does a person take a genuinely life-changing amount of money and turn it into zero? The instinct is to say they were irresponsible, or naive, or unlucky with their investments. But when you look at the data across hundreds of cases, the answer is none of those things. The answer is something much more interesting, much more universal, and much more relevant to your financial life right now, whether you have ever bought a lottery ticket or not. This is a story about what a sudden influx of money actually does to the human brain. It is a story about psychology, not math. And the forces at work in these lottery stories are the exact same forces that are quietly shaping your financial decisions every single day. Let us start with a man named Billy Bob Harrell Jr. In 1997, Billy Bob won $31 million in the Texas lottery. Before the win, he was working at a Home Depot in a Houston suburb. He was behind on his mortgage payments. He was struggling to keep his family afloat financially. He was a deeply religious man who had been praying for a way out of his financial situation for years. And then one day, the numbers came up. $31 million. Within 2 years, he was dead. He took his own life in February of 1999, less than 24 months after winning. Before he died, he sat down with his financial advisor and said something that the advisor never forgot. He said that winning the lottery was the worst thing that ever happened to him. So what happened in those 2 years? What does a person do with $31 million that leads them to that conclusion in less than 2 years? The answer is surprisingly predictable once you understand the pattern. First, the request started immediately. Family members who had not been in contact for years suddenly reappeared. Old friends came forward with urgent needs. Strangers wrote letters. Churches reached out. Charities asked for support. And Billy Bob, who was by nature a generous and deeply compassionate man, found it almost impossible to say no to anyone. He bought houses for relatives. He paid off the debts of friends. He made large donations to his church. He gave money to people he barely knew. By the time anyone tried to quantify it, he was financially supporting 19 different families. Second, his own lifestyle expanded rapidly to match his new identity as a wealthy man. New vehicles, a ranch property, purchases that felt completely justified because he was, after all, a millionaire now. The spending felt appropriate to his new status, not excessive. Third, and this is the part that almost never gets discussed in the stories that circulate about lottery winners, the taxes arrived. Billy Bob had taken the lump sum payout rather than the annuity. The lump sum was already significantly less than the $31 million headline figure. Then federal income tax and state tax took approximately half of what remained. His actual after-tax take-home was somewhere between $6 and $8 million, not $31 million. $6 to $8 million. Already being spread across 19 families, a new lifestyle, and a growing list of financial commitments that had seemed manageable when he was imagining $31 million, but were catastrophic against $6. The math was never going to work. Not even close. Now here is where the story stops being just a cautionary tale and starts being something that directly explains your own financial behavior. Researchers who study lottery winners, inheritance recipients, and sudden wealth events have identified a psychological phenomenon that explains almost everything. It is called the hedonic baseline, and it is one of the most important concepts in behavioral finance that almost nobody outside of academic research has ever heard of. Here's how it works. Your brain has a set point for happiness, a baseline emotional state that you tend to return to regardless of what happens to you externally. When something dramatically positive occurs in your life, a promotion, a new relationship, a financial windfall, your happiness spikes significantly above that baseline. You feel genuinely euphoric. Life feels transformed. But here is what the research shows consistently. Within approximately 6 to 18 months, your brain adapts to the new circumstances. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. The excitement fades. And your emotional state drifts back to roughly where it was before the positive event. This is called hedonic adaptation, and it is one of the most robust findings in psychological research. What this means in practical terms is devastating. A person who wins $5 million will, within 2 years, feel roughly as satisfied with their life as they did before they won. The money stops feeling remarkable. The new house feels like just their house. The new cars feel like just their cars. The lifestyle that once seemed impossibly luxurious starts to feel like the minimum acceptable standard. But here is the trap. The emotional adaptation happens. The financial commitments do not adapt with it. The bigger mortgage still exists. The higher monthly expenses still exist. The social obligations and expectations of the people around them still exist. The hedonic treadmill, as psychologists call it, requires more and more input just to maintain the same emotional baseline. And when the principal has already been spent building a lifestyle that was never sustainable on the actual after-tax windfall, there is simply nowhere left to go. Jack Whitaker, the man I mentioned at the beginning, illustrates this in even more dramatic fashion. His case is one of the most studied in the research on sudden wealth syndrome. Before winning $315 million in 2002, Whitaker was already a successful construction company owner worth an estimated $17 million. He was not a desperate man. He was not financially naive. He was a wealthy, experienced businessman who suddenly became dramatically wealthier. And still the pattern repeated. Within a year of winning, his car was broken into twice at a strip club, and thieves stole a total of approximately $500,000 in cash that he had simply been carrying with him. He was sued repeatedly. Associates began embezzling from him. He was arrested for driving under the influence. His granddaughter Brandy, whom he loved deeply and had begun giving an allowance of $2,000 per week, became involved with drugs and died of a drug overdose in 2004. His daughter died shortly after. In interviews conducted years later, Whitaker described the period following his win as the worst years of his life. He had lost the things that actually mattered to him, and no amount of money had been able to protect him from that loss. In many cases, the money had actively accelerated the bad outcomes by changing the dynamics of his relationships, attracting dangerous people, and enabling destructive behaviors. The money did not protect him. In a very real sense, the money destroyed him. Now, I want to be direct about why I'm telling you this, because you probably will not win the lottery. The odds are effectively zero. But there are at least 3 situations in ordinary financial life where these exact same psychological forces come into play. You may receive an inheritance at some point in your life. You may sell a business or a property. You may receive a bonus, a legal settlement, or some other form of income that feels like a windfall relative to your normal financial reality. And even if none of those things happen, the hedonic, treadmill, and lifestyle inflation are operating on your finances right now, every single month, regardless of whether you have ever experienced a sudden windfall at all. Every raise you have received in your career has likely been followed by a gradual expansion of your spending until the raise no longer felt like extra money. Every upgrade in your housing or your vehicle has likely reset your baseline for what feels acceptable. The psychology does not require a lottery win to operate. It operates continuously on every income level. So what does the research say actually works? What separates a small percentage of sudden wealth recipients who manage to hold on to their money from the overwhelming majority who do not? The findings cluster around three specific frameworks. The first framework is the mandatory waiting period. Financial advisors and psychologists who specialize in working with sudden wealth recipients almost universally recommend implementing a firm 90-day pause before making any significant financial decisions after receiving a windfall. No major purchases, no loans to family members, no lifestyle upgrades, no investment decisions. Just 90 days of leaving the money exactly where it is while the initial emotional intensity settles and a clearer picture of the actual after-tax, after-obligation amount becomes apparent. The reason this works is that the most catastrophic financial decisions made by lottery winners and inheritance recipients are almost always made in the first 30 to 60 days, when the emotional spike is at its highest and the realistic accounting of what the money actually represents has not yet been done. The second framework is a pre-established policy on social giving. The research is extremely clear on this point. The most financially devastating decisions that sudden wealth recipients make are almost never investment decisions. They are social decisions. Giving money to family members, lending money to friends, making commitments to support people financially on an ongoing basis. These decisions feel like the right thing to do in the moment and create a set of obligations that compound over time in ways that are almost impossible to reverse. The people who successfully protect sudden wealth almost always have a clear, predetermined policy about giving before the money arrives. Something as simple as a commitment to give no more than a fixed percentage of the total to any individual or cause, enforced without exceptions, creates a boundary that protects both the money and the relationships. The third framework is lifestyle containment. The research on long-term wealth retention consistently shows that the single most predictive variable is not how much money someone earns or receives. It is the gap between what they earn and what they spend. A person who earns $40,000 a year and consistently spends $35,000 will retire wealthier than a person who earns $200,000 a year and consistently spends $195,000. The math is that simple and that brutal. The lottery winners who keep their money are almost universally the ones who made a deliberate decision to maintain their pre-win lifestyle for at least the first few years after winning. Not to never upgrade their life, but to delay those upgrades until the financial reality of what they actually had was fully understood and a sustainable structure was in place. Jack Whitaker did not have to end up where he did. Billy Bob Harrell did not have to end up where he did. The money was real. The opportunity was real. What failed was not their intelligence, not their character, and not their intentions. What failed was the absence of a structure designed to protect them from the psychological forces that operate on every human brain when the financial rules change suddenly and dramatically. You're playing a financial game every single day. The amounts are different. The circumstances are different, but the psychology is identical. The hedonic treadmill runs whether you won $30 million or got a $10,000 raise. Lifestyle inflation operates whether you hit a jackpot or closed a good month in your business. The social pressures around money exist at every income level. Understanding these forces does not make you immune to them, but it gives you the one thing that most lottery winners never had: a framework. And a framework is the difference between a financial story that ends in regret and one that ends in something that actually lasts. Next week, I'm breaking down the specific daily habits and structural decisions that separate people who build lasting wealth from people who earn good money their entire lives and have very little to show for it at the end. The gap between those two groups is not talent, not luck, and not income. It is something much more specific and much more actionable than that. Subscribe to Quiet Rich so you do not miss it. New videos every Tuesday and Friday.